Okay. Uh, introduce myself. I am David Huntley. I honestly am just a school teacher, and I started woodworking about 5 years ago. When my dad passed away, I inherited some of his equipment, and I've just been playing around. It kind of helps me stay connected to him. Uh, I inherited his shopsmith. If anybody's unfamiliar with the shopsmith, it literally can be everything. It can be your drill press, it can be your scroll saw, it's my lathe, it's my table saw. I can hook a planer to it, a joiner to it, a bandsaw to it. I've recently picked up a standalone scroll saw. Really have loved this machine. It's got a 26-inch throat, allows me to do some unique things. I've also picked up a standalone bandsaw. I got a really good deal off a marketplace, and it seems to get the job done for the small projects that I'm doing. And it's allowed me to play around making some bandsaw boxes. And this particular bandsaw box is the first one that I designed, like what we're going to talk about today. And it had some small flaws in it. I copied it from a picture that I saw on Pinterest. It had no dimensions or anything, so I just had to play around a little bit. And the problem that it had is the fact that it'll hold one of the small pens that I turn, but if the pen had any diameter to the turning at all, a bullet pen or anything that had a fatter design to it, it just simply won't hold it. So I played around with the dimensions a little bit, and then I came up with this one. You can see it's a little bit wider. It's just a little bit longer. It allowed me some more ability to just put more variety of pens in this box. And what I do like about it is designed to flip over, so you can leave it open as a display, or it can be folded up and your pen is tucked away and not visible to anybody. So, the dimensions of that box that we're going to talk about today are not super critical. As you can see, you can make different sizes. It's the process that we're really interested in, and how quick and easy it can really be. So, I've prepared a couple of blanks. I have this blank, which is approximately 6.5 inches long, 1.25 inches in height, and 1 5/8 inches in width. Again, those aren't really critical. And then the pieces that I am going to put on the sides, I've also already milled those. This actually was milled out of a piece of it was actually a piece of oak, and you can see it was pallet wood, so I literally have no expense in it. And this was milled out of a piece of black walnut, and it was just so little of it that I could get these 1/4 inch pieces out of it pretty easily. So, the process of what happens, these two pieces I'm just going to set aside for the moment. I don't need them. The real process takes place in what we're going to do with this particular part of the blank. So, on this particular part of the blank, I am going to measure on this piece. I'm going to measure up 2.5 inches, and then over on this side I'm going to measure up 3 inches, and I'm going to set my phone down while I do that. And I have no stand or anything for my phone, so I'm trying to process it here where I can lean it and you might still be able to see and hear. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to put a 2.5 inch mark. I'm going to come over here, I'm going to put a 3 inch mark, and I am going to connect my dots. So, the angled line that I have showing here is going to be that angled part that I cut out of my box. It's going to be this piece. When I go to make this cut, I'm literally going to cut from this top down to here, but I am not going to make this cut at this point in time because it's going to be easier to drill out some pieces, and you'll see that in the process. So I've set my bandsaw for 1/4 of an inch so that I have a 1/4 of an inch piece, and once I've made a box, I could come over here and just set it with that piece that I've cut off that box. I could go like this, just set it to that width, and you can see it's not super critical. It just needs to be a big enough piece so that it'll support some weight without bending, cracking. So I'm going to lay this on the bandsaw, and I'm going to make that cut, and I'm going to cut down to where the higher part of that mark was, not the lower part. As you can see now, I've made that cut all the way down to the line. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this piece off the top, because this piece right here on the top is not going to get drilled out, but I am going to drill the rest of this most of the way to the bottom of this hole. So I'm going to leave that setting the same, and I'm just going to run this block through and cut to that previous cut that I'd already made. Now, you should be able to see that I've cut this piece off. This piece I'm just going to set aside for a minute. It'll have to be sanded before I glue it back on, but I'm going to set it aside with these two side pieces that I've already laid aside from earlier. This part of the block now, and I'm going to pick it up so you can see it this way where I'm holding the camera. This part of the block, now I am going to find the center here, and when I go to drill this out, I am going to drill not in the center, but I'm going to drill as close to this back wall as I can, but leaving enough meat in the back wall so that it'll still support something here on the back. I could literally do all of this on the bandsaw, but I found if I kind of pre-drill this, it makes some of this work a little bit easier. Okay, so I found the center of just this little piece right here on the top. Not worried about this piece, but the center part of this. And you can see I've kind of drawn a line in here, and I'm going to go over here to my drill station and work on this. Now, ideally, I would love to do this on my drill press. I'm not set up for that at this time. I'm working on what I can do to modify some things so that I can do it that way. I have bought this very long 5/8 speed bit, and the reason I bought this speed bit, not only is it about the right size, but because it has this spiral tip here at the end, it leaves a nice place for the nib of the pen down in the bottom. So because I'm doing this without a drill press, you can see I've got a little bit of an issue when I go to do this. The importance would be try to stay as square as possible in the top of this, and you want to make sure that you're in center from left to right, and you want to make sure that you get to the closest to the cut line as you can, because part of that cut line is actually going to get cut out, but you've got to leave enough room for the actual pen itself. And I'm going to pause this while I drill this hole out. Okay, so I've drilled my hole down, and I've actually used a caliper. I wanted to be about 1/4 of an inch from the bottom with my drill bit, because I don't want to go through the bottom of the... So I've used a caliper. I've come down in after I've drilled my hole, and if I get it down into the center point, I am down where I need to be. So about down to about 1/4 of an inch, and we're going to go back over to the bandsaw. And that cut that I'd put on that earlier, we're going to make that cut and we're going to take this piece off the top. So I'm going to try to set this down where you can see what I'm doing. Hopefully you can see a little bit there as we talk about it. So I'm going to take my fence and just move it over. I'm going to line up my blade with that, and I'm just going to cut to that slit that I already made. Okay, now you should have a better idea what the box is actually taking shape as. Okay, there's my one piece. This is the piece that if you take a look at one of these, you can see this is the piece that's actually going to be hinged, and that this piece that's on the bottom, which doesn't quite look the same yet, we haven't made that final cut, this piece is what these two side pieces are actually going to get glued to. And again, I'm going to set this down as I make this next cut, trying to set it up again where you might be able to see actually what I'm doing. And let's see where I'm at. Okay, I think I'm good. So I'm, again, just going to set these pieces off to the side for a minute. We're going to come back to them when we glue everything up. And this is now the piece that I am interested in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this hole that I had, and I'm going to cut to this outside edge with the bandsaw, and I'm going to cut over here to the outside edge. And I'm going to try to stay as smooth as possible. It just cuts down the amount of sanding that I had to do, which is why I started drilling this with a hole instead of cutting it all on the bandsaw in the first place. So I come over to my bandsaw. And I think you can see now the shape that it's taking. You can see there's a little roughness here on the inside. So I just like to take this over to the spindle sander and, you know, smooth some of that out before I do anything else with it. All the rest of it, guys, is about finish work and gluing things up. The rest of it's actually pretty easy. These two pieces actually get glued to the side. Of this piece, and this piece that we cut off the top, it actually gets glued onto that piece as well, so that you have a top of your box. So it gets all glued together like that. Obviously you want to sand it and fit it to make sure. And before I do anything with the other piece, I like to kind of polish the inside. It makes that process a little easier. And if I use like a wax polish here, it makes the mechanism on the box actually turn a little bit easier. The other piece that I'd cut out then is the piece that's going to come over here. It becomes that hinged part of the box. And again, once I've glued those side pieces on, once these are all glued together, then this piece may have to be sanded a little bit, depending on how much it pulls in. May have to be sanded a little bit so you get that free movement. And instead of drilling a dowel all the way through, because I want that nib to stick in, I drill through this piece of wood, and I drill down into this one probably a little over 1/4 of an inch, and I put my dowel each on each side versus running the dowel all the way through, because one of the reasons that I drilled it out with that particular bit is down here in the bottom of my hole, and you just can't see it. I can see it, but there is a little spot down in because of that spiral bit where this will actually lock into place, and it keeps that pen from rocking from side to side. Okay, so I've taken care of the glue up. You can see that this part is now glued. Usually I take the time to actually finish this, but for the sake of today I didn't finish it. I can finish it later, but I like to finish the inside parts. You know, the parts that are going to be a little harder to reach, I like to put a little finish on the inside of it. And I've been using just a friction polish of some sort. Sometimes I'm using that Hut PPP. Sometimes I use it. Sometimes I use maybe even a beeswax or something along those lines. But finish is finish. Everybody has their own preferences. I've glued it up with CA glue. Again, a lot of people have their own preference. When you go to fit this piece in, a lot of times it'll fit snug in between these two spots, and you'll have to sand it until you get this nice smooth rotation where it's not binding on it at all. So the only thing I have left to do then is to put in my my two dowels that I'm going to use, and so we'll mark those off, put in some dowels, and you'll see the completed box, but it'll be unfinished. Okay, so I'm using a 5/16 dowel, so I've drilled my 5/16 holes on both sides, and I've marked this with the 5/16, but this one I go one size actually up. This one is going to be drilled out at, what is it, 19/64 is what I drill it out at, so that it has room to pivot inside. Alright, so one size up, 21/64, not 19/64, but you guys can math better than I can, and funny enough, I'm a math teacher. There's my humor for the day. Okay, so I've cut some dowels to, you can see I still need to cut them off, but now you can see that the box is complete. It'll open up, it'll flip over, and all that's left is to do the finish work. Hope this helps, guys, and it's my first ever video, so let me know what you think.